Hello, my name is Greg Channon and I'm the Chief Geologist at Elixir Energy. Elixir is exploring for CDM or CSM, coal seam gas, in Mongolia. I lead their technical operations and I've been involved with the business for the last 3 years.
Greg, nice to meet you. You say that you're in hot and sweaty Perth at the moment. What's the temperature there at the moment?
Yeah, so the temperature here is 40 degrees. In Perth, we've had a long, hot summer of many, many days. And at the same time, we're sort of like everybody around the world battling COVID, but doing the best we can.
Well, I think we could do some of your long, hot summers here. It's a pretty miserable February day here in the UK with sleet and snowflakes and grey skies. And anyway, never mind. So Elixir Energy, Mongolia. Now, I'm not the world's expert by any stretch on oil and gas. So you're going to have to be very gentle with me today and walk me through this. Could you just, for my benefit, kind of explain what you're trying to do in terms of coal bed methane, coal seam methane, what Elixir is kind of really trying to do on a kind of technical side of things in terms of getting molecules from underground to market?
Yes, certainly. Well, look, I guess our expertise in coal seam gas comes from Australia on the East Coast, where we have an enormous world-class business that produces gas from coal seams and then puts it through LNG facilities to be sold all over the world. And Elixir has identified that Mongolia is a place where the coal remains untapped. And so we've set about trying to unlock the coal seam gas potential of Mongolia, which we think can have significant reserves of gas coming out from the coal. What we've done here is we've secured a block which is surrounding one of the world's largest thermal coal mines, being Tavan Tolgoi. And so we know the coal is present here, and it's present in thicknesses which are unheard of in most of the world, many hundreds of meters of coal, which is very, very significant. The coals are Permian in age, which means they're very similar to those of the Bowen Basin in Australia. So there are analogues. But at the same time, of course, Mongolia and sort of Northern Asia is geologically very different to that of Eastern Australia. And
hang on. Sorry, just a quick question. So in what you're looking for in a coal bed methane is you're looking for rocks at a certain depth, which have been, why are they not being exploited for coal? Is it because of a depth thing? Is it a kind of a total organic content thing? What are the key parameters you look for in your coal seam?
Yes, well, look, I think the Gobi Desert, where we're exploring, is at the moment well underexplored. Now, coal seam gas then is the gas that is actually attached to the kerogen molecules and absorbed to the rock. So it's an unconventional type of hydrocarbon, unlike a conventional sandstone reservoir where the gas is free within the porous space. And so what we attempt to do with coal seam gas production is lower the pressure of the coal to a point where the gas can desorb off of the kerogens and flow. And we do that by producing water. And as we produce the water that is innately surrounding the coal, so the pressure drops and the gas comes with it.
So you put a well in, pump the water out, pressure changes, gas desorbs. It's like kind of opening the bottle of your champagne or your Coca-Cola bottle, and kind of suddenly the gas desorbs. And then how do you capture the gas? Does it go up the same? Does it come up in the water, or does it come? Do you have a separate mechanism?
No, so it will. So the one hole will produce water and gas. And what we find in the production life of a coal seam gas well is the well starts producing water at perhaps several hundred barrels of water per day, and then gradually the gas comes with it and eventually takes over. So as the water decreases, so the gas increases until you flow pretty much clean gas from the well.
And is that water a waste product? Is it a clean? I mean, what do you have to do to that water to make it of use at the surface?
Yes, well, the water, in the first instance, the water is collected in evaporation ponds. It is, in our example, brackish, total dissolved solids of around 13,000, which means not quite salt, not salt water, but it wouldn't be nice to drink. So in the short term, that will be evaporated. In the summers, the Gobi Desert is hot enough to evaporate. In the winter, probably less so. And in the long term, we'll probably consider either processing the water so it is potable and could be used for plants or animals, or alternatively re-injecting it into the earth, which also isn't that expensive.
And what are the what do you look for in terms of a productive coal seam bed? You know, sorry, this is kind of engineering 101 or kind of extraction 101. You know, if you're exploring for this, what are the parameters that you want to see? What made the Bowen Basin a productive hub for LNG?
Well, there are a lot of key elements to that. I think the first one, and you touched on it earlier, was depth. So there's a sweet spot in coal seam gas with regard to depth where you'd like to be, probably below about 300 metres and above 800 metres. And above 300 metres, what we find is that the gas saturations are too low. The permeability is very good because you don't have much compaction on top, but the gas can tend to escape. And then similarly at 800 metres, the hydrocarbon content is very good, but now you've got a significant overburden of rock and the permeability starts to decrease. So you'll find most of the work that we're looking at is drilling in between about 300 and 800 metres. However, with modern technology and stimulation, we can probably go well beyond that to 1,000 or at most about 1,200. So that's kind of the first thing we're looking for in terms of the area. In terms of the coal quality, we need to have coals that are about sub-bituminous. So not in terms of the ranks of coal, it starts with a soft brown coal, and then it extends all the way to an anthracite, which is highly cooked. And if it's brown, it hasn't been cooked enough. It's a bit like a cake, frankly. You've got to get it in the oven just right. If it doesn't bake, you won't enjoy it. If you burn it, it's no good either. So we want to be kind of in the middle, in about the sub-bituminous range is where we are. Now, so we've got a depth, which is going to give us hopefully our appropriate permeability. We've got the gas then. The next question is there any cleating or fracturing within the coal that can assist? And that will even increase the permeability higher. And sometimes, of course, you can have free gas or conventional gas trapped within the fractures as well. And so,
if the free gas and the trapped gas, of course, would need a trap above the. So you need an impermeable layer above at some point above the coal bed methane.
That is correct. Yes, if it was for the more conventional. So that's not what we rely on, but our experience is, around the world, you can have a benefit from that. And look, what we found with these fractures, and these are fractures that we've actually found in our Nomgon discovery, which we'll talk about shortly, but we've seen where you get faulting and fracturing on top of just the normal cleating that's associated with the coals, you can increase the permeability from around 10 millidarcies up to around about 100. And so it's an order of magnitude difference, and that can really make a difference for productivity.
And how do you assess resources, gas resources in a coal bed? Do you do well tests? I mean, how is there a convention for kind of thickness times organic content times kind of pressure and temperature and where it is on the kind of the cracked scale? How does one go about assessing how many BCFs or possibly TCFs there are in a coal bed resource?
Yes, well, look, there is a kind of a general equation. It's not really too different from that of conventional oil and gas, really. In the first instance, of course, you've got to consider the rock volume, which is really the area times the thickness, and so that's the primary factor. So you need to know how big it is, and then how thick it could be. Beyond that, of course, the total organic content, the void space that could be present, the amount of ash and potentially moisture that are in there are also taken into that calculation. And then finally, you get to a potential gas in place that is dissolved, within the rock. And then from there, we can also estimate the recovery factor, which at this stage, of course, we don't know the recovery factor of our rocks in the Nomgon block, but we can take analogies from all over the world where that's done.
And what do you, as a kind of a working hypothesis, what are you using as that kind of that primary input of your recovery factor?
Yeah, well, it'll be about a 30 or 40, perhaps even 50%. I think we'd have a range like that. We don't obviously have 80 or 90%. I mean, if it was conventional gas, you might see it as high as 70, but you wouldn't see it that high in the unconventional space. Okay,
great. And I read in one of the, I think I was speaking to, or I listened to one of Neil's presentations about exploring for, exploring one sub-basin and then looking for more sub-basins. So can you, let's just move now on to the Nomgon block itself. Perhaps could you pull up you showed me that map earlier. Could you just share that with me now? Because it's a big old area, isn't it?
Yes, well, it certainly is. So I think it's some 30,000, sorry,
not yet.
Share button. I jumped ahead of you there. So some 30,000 square kilometres. It's a very, very big area. I'll just point out here, just for interest, is that there are two areas that are excised from it. One is the Tavan Tolgoi coal mine, which you can see my pointer, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the one in the north, and then this other little small block here is the Oyu Tolgoi copper gold mine belonging to Rio Tinto. So within our block, there is a tremendous amount of resources, some surprisingly unrelated to our gas business. But and the reason for that actually is because although you can't make it out on this slide, this is just an image of the surface from space, is that the Nomgon block and the Gobi Desert consists of a series of broad valleys and ranges. And so the ranges might be 20 or 30 kilometres apart. The ranges might be 20 or 30 kilometres apart. And in between them, you've got the basins where you've got the sediments. So the mountains are generally the old basement rocks where you might find, for instance, another gold mine. And then in between them are the sedimentary basins.
Okay, and the coal seams that are being mined by the power station, those are open pit, presumably. They're all kind of sticking out of the surface. Yes, they are, correct.
And so that's where they're at the surface. And of course, we're looking for those very same coals throughout this area in similar depot centres where they're between about 300 and 800 metres.
Okay, and have you found enough to get started, or are you for Elixir to I see that you're planning 22 wells this year and you're kind of moving towards pilot test work. I mean, are you in one sub-basin which has given you a starter resource, and are you looking for the next sub-basin?
Yes. Well, look, there's probably 20 or 30 TCF of gas spread all over these sub-basins, and we're as a prospective resource. And so we're exploring them, pretty much one at a time. And we need to do that. We need research on the geology, which includes surface mapping, gravity analysis, and of course, seismic. And as we get the seismic, so we drill the wells. And look, I think it's fair to say in the northern area, one of the depot centres didn't contain any coal where we drilled it, which was disappointing. But elsewhere, we've been very successful in identifying coal deposits. And our first coal discovery was in the Nomgon area, which is pretty well in the south central part of the block. Now, when we say we've got a coal seam gas discovery, I think I define that by saying we have intersected coal that has dissolved gas and has identified permeability via testing that shows that the gas will flow if it is depression. And so in the case of Nomgon. That's what we've done. And so from there, we can have a contingent resource. And then as we go forward, every other depot centre that we have success with, we add, if we've got all those parameters, then we have another contingent resource. So we step by this very slowly. It's an enormous resource, but of course, it's step by step to build it up to be something commercial.
Okay, and at Nomgon, how many wells have you got in, and what kind of area are you looking at?
Okay, so the Nomgon area is probably around 20 to 30 kilometres long. It's about 10 kilometres wide. We've drilled 7 wells in there at the moment. And in July this year, we'll be undertaking our first pilot production test in this area with an intention to flow gas.
So in those 7 wells, have the thicknesses and the kind of the geological indicators that you've intersected, have they been relatively consistent across the area? And what's the spacing of those 7 holes? Have they been, within 100 meters of each other, or are they 5 kilometers apart?
Well, they do vary. So some of them are a few hundred meters apart, and some of them are 5 or so kilometres apart, depending on where we're investigating. In terms of the rocks, relatively similar throughout that region. We get about up to 100 metres of coal. So, and most of that is prospective. Some of it at the shallow, of course, if it's near the surface, which some of it is, then of course it doesn't have the gas because it's above 300 metres. But generally, it's relatively consistent. Although I think I would have to say, though, that the geology and the structural geology in particular of the Gobi Desert is complex, and we do get surprises from time to time. So
this Permian coal, it's had a number of kind of structural events, and then the basin and range. I mean, those are obviously extensional, depositional centres, but has there been compression and transpression since then? Yes, indeed. So look, and we've worked this very hard. It's just quite complex, but we've had at least 2 or 3 stages of tectonic change. We started with, as you're exactly right, a extensional, probably half graben type of depositional environment. It's then been compressed, and it now is in wrench, in a kind of a wrench or strike slip situation. Okay, and so there's a lot of structural mapping to do. The seismic will really help. So presumably 3D seismic, even just cross lines on seismic will really help work out the kind of, I don't know whether there are any ramp relay structures or just kind of the scale and the morphology of the blocks. The cold blocks, because 100 meters is a good thickness to act as a marker horizon. Does it pop up nicely on the seismic? Can you see the coal?
Well, yes. Look, interestingly, not at first. We thought we had identified coals, of course, are very brittle, and they generally stand out on the seismic. But interestingly, in this part of Mongolia, we've got a lot of conglomerates which sit over the top of it. That's very common that we drill in the Triassic before we get to the Permian. We drill probably 200 or 300 meters of these interbedded conglomerates. And what we found is that they soak up a lot of the energy, and so we don't see the bright reflectors that you typically would for coal. Notwithstanding that, after a few wells, though, we retuned our seismic, and we are able to determine, where the coal should be. So again, not an easy thing to do, but we did get there in the end.
Okay, and with the 7 wells that you've got at Nomgon, is that enough to put a contingent resource on it, or do you have to put more wells in first to come up with a kind of an initial estimate?
No, we've got a contingent resource already based on those 7 wells.
And is it public? I might have missed it.
Yes, I think it is, and I think it's around about 20. I think in the middle case around 25 BCF, and on the high side, I think it was up around the 50.
Okay.
I hope I'm close on those numbers. I don't have them to hand.
Okay, no, that's fine. It gives me an order of magnitude. Good. And when you talk
which is
about
modest, sorry, just Merlin, by the way, which is modest. We acknowledge that because you can only go in the area where you've got your drilling. We've got all this enormous area, and of course, I need wells. I won't get a contingent resource unless I've got wells nearby that show a correlation. So, we just go step by step. sub-basin by sub-basin as we build up our resource.
And when you talk about sub-basin, are you talking about sub-basins within Nomgon? Or are you calling... Yes. Okay, so Nomgon is not a sub-basin. The 20 or 30 Ks by 10 Ks. That's...
okay, so let me just clarify that. The block is called Nomgon because that is the general region. And by coincidence, the first field we've discovered, which is in one separate depot centre, is also called Nomgon. Apologies if that's confusing, but that was because we drilled it first and it was successful.
Yeah. Good. You'll want to, with the pilot plant, you want to just show that the molecules flow. And then in addition, you're going to be wanting to drill more holes in that, let's call it Nomgon 1 area, to grow that modest first resource into a larger resource. What scale do you think, we've got enough to build a power plant here or start...
I think our plans are that the resource we have in Nomgon as it is right now is enough to put in our first pilot electricity plant, if you like. I think that these 2 wells, we're going to be drilling 2 wells in a pilot in a very specific spacing. We'll produce the water first into evaporation pond. We'll have pumps, which we're shipping from Australia. There's a lot of technical effort that we've learnt from our experiences in Australia. And so we'll get the gas up and flowing. Now, you're probably going to ask me how much gas is it going to flow? I don't know. And this is why we're doing all this work. No one's ever flowed gas like this in Mongolia in the past, and we really don't know, and I don't think I will, offer you a number, but it's not going to be 10 million cubic feet a day. I mean, these are relatively low flow wells, but at the same time they're very, very cheap and modestly drilled. So we don't even 1 million cubic feet a day is not, that wouldn't be critical. But anyway, I probably have said too much there, but we just don't know how it's going to flow.
Yeah, and so a low productivity well in Australia would be 1 million cubic feet per day. Is that?
Yeah. Well, look, I think you'll find in coal seam gas a lot lower. I mean, I think there's plenty of wells in Australia that are less than 500,000 cubic feet a day that are commercial. So because they're quite long lived, and of course they're all very close to facilities in a high price market like the East Coast. That for me is just a simple calibration. That you've just said that 500,000 cubic feet per day is a low producer and 10 billion days is a high producer in that market. So, quick question: is there any problems with the COVID situation in China where they're trying to be zero COVID? Does that stop any of your kit getting in and out? Well, look, it certainly slows it down, Merlin. So, look, let me, if you don't mind, I could give you a few little insights into how we've dealt with COVID over the last couple of years. It has certainly impacted on our business, but at the same time, we've done the best that we possibly could. Typically, I and my technical team would travel to Mongolia regularly, and with the purpose of not so much overseeing, but teaching the local geoscientists and team that we have who have never had this type of exposure and expertise on what we're trying to achieve. And of course, when COVID hit, well, we're all grounded. And so things like the drilling of the wells, the testing of the wells, our injectivity testing have to be done remotely. We can't send in experts who would typically come in and run those specific things. So we initiated a program whereby we had Zoom cameras like we have now, literally on the drilling rig in the Gobi, where people in Australia could coach and tell the locals how, as much as show me that. If you can't read the dial, show it to me and I'll tell you what it means. And have you got this tap turned the right way? Is this pipe heading in the right direction? Amazing. And I've got to say, I'm very proud of the teams we've got on both sides of the world, because it was under those conditions that we tested our first IFOT and got 100 and something millidarcies of permeability. It was a very successful test. So we do the best we can. COVID, of course, is rife in as it is everywhere, but in Mongolia, most of our team have contracted COVID at one time or another. They can't escape it, and so at times we've had to put isolation gers, which are those round tents, on the rig. And if anyone comes to the rig, they must spend 5 days in there and make sure they're clear of any illness before they join our team. So we put a lot of effort into that. With regard to the border is all but closed at the moment. And so it is difficult, but we can get our things through. So where it used to take a month to 2 months, now it takes 3 to 4 months. And I'm sorry, that is the way it is. But look, we use the best people we can, and we do get it through. It just takes time. Is
it going to affect your timetable this year?
Well, I don't think so. The biggest things we need to ship now is all the equipment for the pilot program, and that includes the skids, some pumps. The casing's got to come from China. All these things we knew were going to be difficult. They've all been purchased. Most of them, the long lead items, have been either made or are about to be shipped right now. And if we can get through in 3 to 4 months, we'll see the drilling start probably towards the middle of the year. And look, that's only a few months later than we might have preferred to do, but I think is acceptable, and it will mean that we'll be able to test the well in the second half of the year and almost definitely have a result before the year closes.
It's so interesting to see what China's doing with the Olympics now, and
yes,
whether they're going to try and stay COVID free or not, or stay in their little bubble when it's endemic. And anyway,
I've long given up trying to predict that.
Well, what we haven't spoken about at all is the difference between methane and hydrogen.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So, Elixir's gone through this rebranding, going to be the green company, going to produce hydrogen. In a sense, is that just kind of a little bit further downstream? Is that next year's challenge? Or if I'm looking at this, for me, as a kind of with a slightly technical head on, for me, am I right to think that the first challenge is to understand how the molecules flow, how the production profile looks, and what the reproducibility is of these pilot programs? You've talked about doing it step by step, but given the structural complexity and the fact that this is a very early entry into the Nomgon basins, surely the critical things for the next 12 months until at least the end of this year, and possibly longer, is how that pilot plant performs and what the reproducibility of it is. And then the hydrogen methane question is just further down the track. Is that fair or unfair?
No, I think that's very fair. I think my complete focus as the technical lead is on the gas. Look, I know Neil is working heavily on a raft of other energy opportunities, and some of them will be directly related, of course, to what we're doing, but some are actually independent. He's been working a lot with wind and even green hydrogen, which could come from the water, either the water that's produced or other water in our area. So look, there's a lot of opportunity for that, and I think I would refer you back to Neil over the detail because he's really driving that part of the business.
That's the eco overlay on the top, which is fine. It's branding, all that kind of stuff. On the gas molecules, it's pipeline and then the reproducibility of it. Fine.
Exactly.
And the hydrogen would come with. Is it cracking methane? Is that what?
It can come from cracking methane, or it can come from cracking water. So I think they're both reasonable opportunities. Again, it will just that's an issue of economics. Of course, what they say is that when it's hydrocarbon cracked, it's what's that called? That's the grey, or I forget quite the colour now, but of course not quite as environmentally friendly as if it was just water. So it seems to me when there's gas needed in this part of the world, most of our methane will head to markets for electricity generation and heating.
Okay, and the dynamics of the local grid network and the pricing contracts, that's all something that I should speak to Neil about. Yes,
look, I think so. There's a lot of complexity to that, but he's well over that. That's in fact his business. I must admit, I'm as I look to this year, it's going to be drilling 20 exploration wells and then extending our discoveries from the first one at Nomgon into many others that we're going to be drilling this year, and then of course that making sure we get a reasonable flow from that production pilot test, and making sure we learn as much as possible about the reservoirs that we're going to be producing for many years to come.
Okay, well let's dig a little bit into those 20 exploration wells that you're drilling.
Yep.
How many? What's the spacing of? Okay, first question is how many are in the Nomgon 1 discovery area, and how many are in other sub basins?
Okay, I might just take you back to the map now, which I think we can show. Yeah. Let me just pick up the map, and I'll just show you that. So this is the 2022 exploration and appraisal program, and you can see the pilot plan, which is in red. So that's in the Nomgon depot centre right here, and then you can see around the area. There's the blues are all of the exploration wells that we're going to be drilling. And the yellow is the seismic we'll be acquiring in 2022. So if you look at that, the wells span the entire block. And look, I will acknowledge they're focused on the southern half, and the reason for that is we've had significant more success in the southern half of the block rather than the north. So that's where we're really going to be hammering it this year. So the wells you can see loosely. Most of them are about 20 to 25 kilometres apart. Probably the furthest one apart is this one here, which is 50. Bearing in mind the whole block is almost 200 kilometres. When I out in the field, it would take me most of the day to drive from one side of the block to the other. There's no roads to speak of, just four-wheel drive tracks.
Amazing. And tell me about the two just on the south edge of the coal block.
Okay, these two guys here. So, look, our studies have shown that there is clearly the coal at Tavan Tolgoi does extend to the south into our block, and so we've got two wells there to investigate the edges of that depot centre in the south. So, look, it won't be as thick. It won't be as thick as in the in the Tavan Tolgoi mine itself. So I'm not expecting 100 metres of coal here. It'll probably be more modest, around the 10 to 20 in this location, but good quality coals, and we think they're worth a test. So we're going to put a few wells in there. On this scale, that looks as though we're almost in their block, but we're clearly on the southern side when you zoom in.
And the sighting of all of these, the other blue dots, the position of the other exploration wells, is that being done on the basis of existing seismic that you've got, mapping, intelligence? Is it just equidistant between basement rocks in what you believe is a sub-basin? How have you targeted and cited those?
Well, they're very targeted. Let me say at the get-go that we put a lot of technical effort into every well. We write a well proposal for every well. We predict the depth and the thickness of coal in every well. Our tools, as I've said before, are existing intelligence, where we know a well has already been drilled for mining purposes that might have coal. Of course, is there outcrop? Going down dip of outcrop is always a safe way to go. We use gravity, we use magnetics, and of course we use seismic. And so every well that you see here will be on the basis of at least one, if not multiple, of those uses.
And historically, you mentioned that some in the north, the coal wasn't productive, and I think you actually said in a couple there wasn't any coal. But is your success rate pretty good on finding coal?
Success rate runs at about 70 to 75%. So about 3 out of 4. So it's not too bad. Look, I'd love to have thought I'd drill coal everywhere I went. My first 15 wells were all coal, but we do drill a few I'd call dry holes or non-coal holes from time to time. And I think that's got to be expected in an area this large where there's never been any petroleum exploration. I think it's worth pointing out that the coal seam business in the east coast of Australia came after extensive oil and gas exploration over half a century. Whereas here, there hasn't been any oil and gas exploration. So we know that there's massive coals from the mines, but the subsurface is very poorly understood, and we've had to start from scratch.
Yeah, and well, I mean, it's been fantastic you've got that strike rate, particularly with the structural complexity in the area. What do you budget for a well, roughly, in terms of time and money?
Right, well, I think that first of all, in Mongolia, our drill companies prefer to use a turnkey, where they drill on a depth basis. Now, this is pretty unusual around the world because it means they're taking all the drilling risk. And if they get stuck in the hole, or their machines break, or something goes wrong and they don't make any hole that day, we don't pay. So the wells are very, very modestly priced. Now, look, Neil hasn't actually released any pricing on these, so I'll leave it to him if he wants to do that. But look, I will say that they're a fraction of what you might pay in Australia for the same well. And of course, as we talked about, the great equation of production versus economics, well, of course, that plays into it heavily. And so I don't think it would be a secret to say that you could make a significantly lower flow rate economic here as opposed to in Australia.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Greg, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating introduction to Elixir Energy and the technical side of things. Are there things that I haven't asked about? Anything that you want to kind of talk about on a technical side of things that I haven't kind of touched on? What jumps out?
No, look, I think it's been a pretty broad-ranging discussion. I mean, you're obviously pretty astute. One thing that I did want to mention, which I'm very proud of, is the team we've got both in Mongolia and in Australia. And as I mentioned to you at the beginning, we've not gone down the path of hiring a lot of expensive expats in country. In fact, we have none. We only have local people. There's a team of probably 8 geoscientists plus other support staff and engineers, etc. And in Australia, we've gone down the path of hiring part-time contractors who are very experienced in the business of coal seam gas. And so it had meant that we can get the very best people that we can switch on and switch off, where everybody, of course, works from home pretty much these days. I'm at home now. And so we find that I can call experts in organic geochemistry, structural geology, operations, who I've worked with for 20 or 30 years. We get them together, we solve problems via this Zoom method, and then when we're finished, they're off to do something else. And so we can make a very effective business at quite a modest price, and something I'm particularly proud of, that we've been very successful at high-end technical work, a great deal of depth to the team, and yet I don't have 10 or 15 people on salary.
Well, the pandemic's been an extraordinary accelerator of technology, hasn't it? I mean, it's transformed working practices around the world. Do most people speak Russian as kind of, are they taught Russian at school? Is it?
Well, look, I describe it like this. It's first language, of course, is Mongolian. And if you are probably up to about over 40 years of age, then you're probably going to speak Russian, but if you're younger than 40, English will probably be your second language.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing the ongoing news about the exploration wells. Is that news going to be coming through on kind of a regular basis? And I know that Neil might be doing that, but from a technical side, will you be working kind of on those wells? So let's say we've got 11 months of the year left. You've got 22 wells. That's 2 a month. Is that the plan? You're starting now, and it's 2 a month, boom, 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 for the rest of the year. Yeah.
Well, look, in fact, of course, the weather in Mongolia now is horrendous, and so and of course, it's also the new year. So we won't start again probably till the end of this month, February. So I think it's fair to say that most companies, not all, but most companies, if they're working all year round, will take a little bit of December, January and February off, because it's so difficult. I know that there is a company working out there at the moment, but most have pulled down. So we'll start in late February, early March. We'll have 2 rigs running constantly, and Neil would normally report about once a month or so on that. There'll be a 3rd rig once we start the pilot drilling, and of course there will be some great news there that we'd expect around the middle of the year.
Great. Well, I look forward to it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.